There's a moment, a powerful, quiet moment when you stop chasing, stop explaining, stop proving your worth, and instead, you simply go quiet. Not out of anger, not out of ego, but because you finally realize your peace is louder than his attention. See, silence is uncomfortable for people who once had access to your energy. It echoes everything they took for granted. And when you stop reaching out, that's when the tables turn. Today, I want to talk to you about that exact moment when you match his silence. Not to play games, not to manipulate, but because you've reached a higher level of self-awareness. Because sometimes, the most powerful response to disrespect is no response at all. So let's go deep into what happens when you stop filling the silence, when you let it breathe, and how that silence becomes the thing he never forgets. Silence is not weakness, it's emotional strength. There's a misconception that silence equals surrender. That, when you go quiet, you've given up. That when you stop calling, stop texting, stop explaining, it must be because you're broken, defeated, or too hurt to speak. But that couldn't be further from the truth. In reality, silence can be one of the strongest, most self-respecting decisions a person can ever make. It's not weakness, it's emotional strength in its purest form. When someone you care about starts to pull away, your natural instinct is to bridge that gap. You want to fix things, clarify misunderstandings, and remind them how special what you had was. That urge comes from love, from care, and from hope. But there comes a point when you realize that constantly fighting for someone who's not meeting you halfway doesn't build connection, it builds exhaustion. That's when silence becomes your armor. Because instead of pouring energy into someone who's not listening, you redirect that energy inward. You begin to protect your peace instead of defending your pain. It takes emotional maturity to be silent when every part of you wants to speak. To sit in that uncomfortable space between what you feel and what you deserve, and still choose self-control over reaction. Silence says, I could explain myself, but I no longer need to. It says, I could fight for your attention, but I value my energy too much. It's an invisible boundary, one that tells the world you've reached the end of justification and the beginning of self-respect. Silence is not about ignoring someone out of spite. It's about respecting yourself enough not to beg for what should be freely given. It's realizing that your voice carries more power when it's not used to chase validation. Because sometimes, the most powerful way to communicate is to stop explaining things to people who have already decided not to understand you. There's a deep peace that comes with silence, not the silence that comes from fear or suppression, but the kind that comes from strength. The kind that says, I know what I bring to the table, and if you can't see it, I'm not going to keep proving it. That peace is magnetic. It draws respect from others and clarity from within. It reminds you that your value doesn't shrink just because someone failed to see it. People often mistake emotional restraint for indifference. They think that because you're calm, you don't care. But what they don't realize is that silence isn't the absence of emotion, it's the mastery of it. It's the ability to feel everything deeply, the confusion, the disappointment, the sadness, and still choose grace. Silence doesn't mean you're numb. It means you're disciplined enough not to let emotions dictate your worth or your reaction. When you finally reach the point where you can respond with silence, you're no longer reacting from pain, you're responding from wisdom. That's growth. You've learned that not every situation deserves your words, not every person deserves your explanation, and not every distance deserves to be closed. Sometimes, peace means allowing space to remain space. And here's the beautiful irony. The moment you go silent, that's when people start to notice. They feel the absence of your voice, your energy, your effort. They realize that your presence was never loud, it was consistent, caring, and grounding. And when that's gone, silence becomes deafening. So, if you've ever been made to feel that your silence makes you weak, remember this, it's actually your quiet strength that speaks the loudest. You've learned that silence isn't about hiding, it's about healing. It's not about pride, it's about peace. Because sometimes, walking away without a word isn't the end of a conversation, it's the beginning of your power. In a world where everyone is shouting to be heard, the one who can stay silent and still stand tall, that's the person who truly understands their worth. Silence, when rooted in self-respect, doesn't make you powerless. it makes you untouchable. Matching his silence shifts the power dynamic. When a man pulls away, most women feel an immediate rush of panic. The silence feels heavy, unfamiliar, and threatening. You start to wonder what you did wrong, replay conversations in your head, and search for a way to fix what suddenly feels broken. But here's the truth: the moment you stop reacting to that silence, the power dynamic changes completely. When you match his silence, you're no longer playing the role he expects. You step out of the emotional pattern that kept you chasing, explaining, and overgiving, and you shift the energy back in your favor. Men often retreat when they sense your energy revolving around them. It's not always intentional. Sometimes it's instinctive. They feel the pressure of being needed, admired, or pursued, and their response is to pull back. In those moments, they unconsciously test whether your world collapses without their presence. When you chase, they feel validated. They know they still hold control. But when you match their silence, when you don't text, don't explain, don't fill the space, you disrupt that pattern. Suddenly, he's no longer sure where he stands. The certainty that you'll always be there starts to fade. And that uncertainty? That's when he begins to feel what you once felt. Your silence flips the emotional equation. He expected your reaction. He prepared for it. But when that reaction doesn't come, his ego starts to tremble. The absence of your energy creates a void that his pride can't fill. He starts to question whether you've moved on, whether someone else has your attention, whether he misread your connection entirely. And the irony is, the less you do, the more he feels. That's the silent power of emotional detachment. You no longer need to prove anything. You've reclaimed your power by simply stepping back and letting the silence speak for you. See, relationships and even situationships are built on emotional exchanges. Every message, every response, every reaction creates a rhythm. When you constantly respond, that rhythm becomes predictable. He knows your next move. But when you stop, when you become silent, you break the rhythm. You stop dancing to the tune of his inconsistency. That's when the energy begins to shift. Suddenly, he's the one feeling off balance. He's the one refreshing his messages, checking if you've been online, wondering why you're not reacting the way you used to. Matching silence is not about revenge or manipulation. It's not about making him miss you just to prove your worth. It's about emotional alignment, choosing to no longer invest energy where it isn't reciprocated. It's about respecting yourself enough to let things unfold naturally without forcing connection. Because when you stop feeding the dynamic with attention, it loses power over you. And the most surprising thing happens when you do this: you begin to feel lighter. You realize that silence is not empty, it's full of answers. It shows you who will reach out and who won't. It reveals who values your presence and who was just comfortable with your effort. Silence clarifies what confusion once clouded. It empowers you to see reality without the noise of constant communication. He may try to test your boundaries again. He may send a message, drop a like, or suddenly reappear with casual words like, "Hey, how have you been?" But now, the power has shifted. Because your silence taught you something he never expected: how to live without needing his validation. And that scares him more than anything else. When you match his silence, you no longer operate from fear, you operate from confidence. You stop reacting and start observing. You move from seeking reassurance to embodying self-assurance. The same silence that once hurt you becomes the silence that heals you, because it reminds you that your peace is not dependent on anyone's attention. So when he goes quiet and expects you to fill the void, don't. Let him sit in it. Let him feel the weight of his own distance. Because when you match his silence, the power no longer belongs to the one who left it, belongs to the one who learned to stay still. Your absence speaks louder than your words. There comes a point when your absence starts saying everything your words never could. You can spend days, weeks, or even months trying to express how much you care, trying to explain what went wrong, or pleading for someone to see your worth, and still they won't hear you. But the moment you go silent, the moment you pull your energy back, that's when they finally begin to understand. Because sometimes the quiet echo of your absence is far louder than any speech you could ever give. When you stop showing up the way you used to, It creates a shift that can't be ignored. He notices when your messages no longer come through, when his phone doesn't light up with your name, when his jokes no longer have the same audience. There's a silence in the space you once filled, not just physically, but emotionally. The warmth you brought, the care you gave, the stability you offered, all of it becomes a memory. And that absence begins to speak, not in words, but in the void that's left behind. Your absence becomes the mirror that reflects his choices. It shows him the reality of what he took for granted. Because when you were always there, your love became background noise, something he assumed would always play. He didn't notice the rhythm you created until the music stopped. That's what absence does. It strips away the illusion of certainty. It makes a person realize that consistency is not guaranteed, that love is not endless when it's not nurtured, and that people who care eventually stop trying when they feel unseen. What he once viewed as your presence, your care, your effort, your constant understanding now becomes a haunting emptiness. He starts to notice the missing good morning texts, the encouraging words before his big day, the emotional safety he once felt around you. He might scroll through old conversations just to feel connected again, replay moments in his mind, or check your social media to see if you're still watching him. That's when he begins to feel the weight of your silence. Because now, he's living in the space where your energy used to exist, and that space feels cold. Your absence teaches him what your words couldn't. When you were there, explaining your feelings, trying to make things right, he wasn't listening. He thought your love would always be there, no matter how distant he became. But when you stop explaining and start disappearing, he's forced to listen in a new way. Your silence becomes the lesson. Your absence becomes the truth. It communicates boundaries without confrontation, strength without shouting, and self-respect without words. There's something deeply powerful about no longer being accessible. You no longer respond instantly. You no longer show up when it's convenient for him. You no longer allow your peace to be disturbed by someone else's inconsistency. And as that pattern shifts, he feels it. He feels the absence of your energy, that calm reassurance you once gave him, even when he didn't deserve it. And suddenly, he realizes that your presence was not ordinary. It was love disguised as patience. It was kindness disguised as care. It was loyalty disguised as consistency. But here's the most beautiful part. Your absence doesn't just change how he sees you, it changes how you see yourself. You begin to realize that you were never asking for too much. You were simply asking the wrong person. You start to appreciate the power of pulling back, not as revenge, but as self-respect. You start to feel lighter, more grounded, more in control. Because now, your energy is yours again. And one day, when he looks around and realizes that your silence hasn't broken, that you haven't come back to fill the space, that's when regret settles in. That's when he understands that your absence isn't temporary. It's transformation. You've outgrown the need to be heard by someone who never truly listened. So let your absence speak. Let it echo where your words once fell flat. Because in the end, silence carries the message that words never could, that your worth was never dependent on who noticed it, only on you, finally realizing it for yourself. Silence is his karma. You don't need to seek revenge, explain your pain, or prove your worth to anyone who didn't value it when you gave it freely. The universe has a way of balancing things, and sometimes that balance comes not through loud confrontation, but through quiet absence. That quiet, your silence, becomes his karma, because one day he will be forced to sit in the very emptiness he created. One day he'll feel the same uncertainty, confusion, and loneliness that you once felt when you were trying to hold everything together. And when that day comes, your silence will echo louder than any words you could have ever said. When you choose silence, you're not punishing him. You're simply refusing to participate in a cycle that no longer serves your peace. You're letting nature, time, and truth do their work. Because silence has a way of exposing what words can't. It mirrors back to him the reality of his own behavior, the neglect, the distance, the inconsistency. When you stop reaching out, stop initiating, stop giving endless chances, he's left alone with the consequences of his choices. That's not cruelty, that's accountability. And accountability often arrives in the form of quiet reflection. He might not understand it at first. He might think your silence is temporary, that you're just trying to get a reaction, that you'll eventually break and reach out like before. But as time passes and you remain grounded in your peace, something begins to shift. He starts to feel the silence in places he didn't expect. In the middle of the night, when his phone stays still, in the moments when he scrolls through his notifications and doesn't see your name, in the times when he faces something big and instinctively wants to tell you but can't. That's when silence starts to whisper the truth he's been avoiding. You're gone, and she's not coming back. Silence becomes his mirror. Every moment he ignored your feelings, every time he dismissed your effort, every opportunity he wasted, it all comes back to him in that stillness. He starts to hear the echo of your patience, the kindness he didn't reciprocate, and the loyalty he took for granted. That's karma. Not in the form of revenge, but in the realization of loss. Because real karma isn't about watching someone suffer. It's about them finally seeing what they had and realizing they can't have it again. Your silence makes him confront his own behavior in ways your words never could. When you tried to explain your feelings, he tuned you out. When you tried to fix things, he made you feel dramatic. But silence doesn't give him the comfort of argument or justification. It leaves him alone with himself. And for someone who always ran from emotional responsibility, that's the hardest place to be. Silence exposes the truth he tried to ignore, that you were the calm in his chaos, the stability in his confusion, and the peace he didn't know he needed until it was gone. The beauty of silence as karma is that it doesn't require effort. You don't have to plot or prove anything. You just have to let go, because when you stop chasing, the energy reverses. The person who once took you for granted starts to crave your energy again, but it's too late. He'll realize that what you offered wasn't ordinary affection, it was rare emotional safety. And no matter how hard he tries, he won't find it replicated in someone else. Eventually, he'll reach a point where he wants to fix things, but the timing won't align anymore. You'll be in a different place emotionally, mentally, spiritually. You won't be waiting for closure or validation. You'll have already found peace in your own silence. And that's the ultimate irony. The same silence he thought gave him freedom becomes the silence that teaches him the cost of taking love for granted. So yes, silence is his karma. It's not loud, dramatic, or vengeful. It's calm, patient, and poetic. It's life giving him the same emptiness he handed to you. And while he sits in that silence, you'll be thriving in yours, proving that the greatest revenge is not rage, but release. Your silence is self-respect in action. There's a moment in every person's life when they stop explaining, stop defending, and stop trying to prove their worth, not because they've given up, but because they've finally remembered who they are. That moment is powerful. It's when silence stops being something that happens to you and starts being something you choose. And when you choose silence, not out of pride, but out of peace, that's self-respect in action. Self-respect isn't loud. It doesn't need to announce itself, argue, or demand to be understood. It simply walks away from what no longer aligns. Silence is that quiet walk away. It's the decision to no longer waste your breath on someone who's already shown they don't value your voice. It's saying, I'm not going to keep repeating myself to someone who's already decided not to listen. When you choose silence, you're choosing dignity over desperation. You're showing that your peace is worth more than being right, and your worth is not up for negotiation. When someone disrespects you, dismisses your feelings, or pulls away without explanation, your first instinct might be to confront them, to get clarity, to demand closure, to make them understand the pain they've caused. But self-respect whispers a different truth. You don't need to explain your boundaries to people who have already crossed them. You don't need to teach someone how to value what they were never ready for. Your silence does that for you. It communicates a kind of strength that no words can match. Because when you stop reacting, you stop feeding chaos. You reclaim control over your energy. Silence is not avoidance, it's alignment. It's you saying, I refuse to participate in anything that costs me my peace. It's you setting a boundary without needing to argue for it. The world tells you that to be strong, you must speak up. And yes, sometimes that's true. But other times, the strongest thing you can do is to simply not respond. Not every battle deserves your voice. Not every wound needs your defense. Some things are better healed in quiet. When you stop engaging with behavior that disrespects your worth, you're not being cold, you're being clear. You're showing through silence that you have standards, that you value yourself enough to not chase validation. You're saying, I've learned my lesson. I no longer confuse attention with affection. And that's when everything begins to change. Because self-respect shifts the energy in every relationship you have. People can feel it when you move differently. They sense when you're no longer easily persuaded, when your emotions are no longer available on demand. Your silence teaches them more about your strength than your words ever could. What makes silence so powerful is that it's not reactionary, it's intentional. It's a conscious decision to protect your inner world from unnecessary noise. It's an act of emotional discipline, one that says, I don't need closure from you because I've already given it to myself. You stop performing for people's approval and start standing firmly in your truth. You begin to understand that silence doesn't mean weakness, it means wisdom. It's what happens when you've been through enough to know that arguing your worth is beneath you. Your silence will make people wonder. They'll question your calm, your distance, your composure. Some might even call you detached. But in reality, you're not detached. You're free. You've stopped reacting to the things that once controlled you. You've stopped explaining your heart to those who mishandled it. That's self-respect. It's not built in one moment. It's built every time you choose not to break your peace for the sake of being understood. And one day, the same people who once ignored your voice will feel the weight of your silence. They'll realize it wasn't anger, it was growth. It wasn't punishment, it was peace. You didn't go quiet because you stopped caring. You went quiet because you started caring about yourself more. So remember this, your silence doesn't mean you've lost. It means you've evolved. It's the living proof that you've finally chosen yourself, and that's the highest form of self-respect there is. When you match his silence, you become his regret. At first, he doesn't notice your silence. He assumes it's temporary. He tells himself you're just giving him space, that you'll eventually come back like you always do. He's confident in the pattern. He pulls away, you chase, he grows distant, you try harder, he goes quiet, you fill the silence. But this time, something's different. This time, you don't respond, you don't explain, you don't beg to be heard. You simply match his silence. And that's the moment everything begins to change, because when you stop chasing, he starts feeling. When you stop reaching out, he starts reaching inward. And before long, he realizes what he's lost. That's when your silence turns into his regret. Matching his silence isn't a game, it's growth. It's what happens when you finally get tired of overextending yourself for someone who never met you halfway. It's not about punishing him, it's about protecting your peace. You've spent enough time trying to prove your loyalty to someone who couldn't even see your worth. Now, you've stepped back, not to hurt him, but to heal yourself. Yet ironically, that's exactly when he starts to feel the pain you once carried. The emptiness that used to consume you now consumes him. He starts to notice the difference in his days. The small things that once felt ordinary suddenly feel off. His phone feels quieter, his world feels emptier. The energy you once poured into him, the care, the laughter, the effort, is no longer there to feed his ego or comfort his loneliness. He realizes that what he mistook for neediness was actually devotion. What he called too much was, in truth, rare consistency. And now that it's gone, he understands that silence doesn't always mean indifference. Sometimes it means the person who used to care has finally let go. Your silence becomes his mirror. It forces him to look at himself, not the version he pretended to be, but the one who took something real for granted. He starts to question his decisions. Why didn't I treat her better? Why did I think she'd never walk away? Why did I mistake her patience for permanence? That's how regret begins, not with anger or blame, but with realization. The same silence that once gave him comfort now keeps him awake at night. He starts to replay your conversations, the moments he dismissed your feelings, the times you reached out and he ignored you. Each memory cuts a little deeper because now there's no response coming. You've matched his silence, and it's speaking louder than words ever could. And the more he tries to move on, the more he feels your absence. He might meet new people, scroll through social media, or distract himself with friends, but nothing feels the same. Because deep down, he knows he didn't lose you to someone else, he lost you to your peace. He'll realize that you were the calm in his storm, the anchor in his chaos, and the softness he never knew he needed until it was gone. That realization doesn't come all at once. It hits slowly, in moments of reflection and loneliness. But when it hits hard. By matching his silence, you've done what words never could. You've made him see your worth. He'll understand, far too late, that your silence wasn't coldness, it was clarity. You were never trying to win him back. You were reclaiming yourself. And that's what haunts him most, that he pushed away someone who would have stood by him through anything, all because he mistook her quiet strength for weakness. So, he'll scroll through old photos, linger on your name, wonder if you still think about him. But you won't be there anymore. Your energy will be elsewhere, blooming, thriving, and peaceful. Because while he's stuck in regret, you'll have already turned your silence into power. That's the beautiful irony of it all. The same silence he once ignored becomes the silence that echoes in his mind. It becomes his reminder, his lesson, his consequence. You don't have to make him regret losing you, your peace already did. Because when you match his silence, you stop being the one who was hurt and become the one he can't forget. And that's when your silence becomes the sound of his biggest regret. When you match his silence, you don't lose him, you find yourself. And that's the most beautiful ending of all.